Just recently, in the last couple of years, I've done something very bold. I've pretty much sold all my residential properties and I've just put them into big commercial assets. So my most recent one was a shopping centre in Brisbane, 8 tenants, big freestanding site, 3.175 mil. All this investing is to park my money and profits from my residential investing, and even a little bit of my business, because business is doing well as well,
Yes.
into an asset that preserves my lifestyle of traveling 4 months of the year with my family.
G'day everyone, this is Iynka here. Welcome to Investor Journeys, where we chat with everyday Aussies and seasoned investors about their property journeys, the wins, the stuff-ups and everything in between. Whether they've got one property or a whole portfolio, we dive into how they did it, what they've learned, and what their journey's been like so far. No fluff, just real stories from real people. So let's get stuck in. G'day everyone, welcome to the IJ podcast. Looking forward to having you here. We've got an exciting guest today. I was actually on the other side of the mic a few weeks ago with this guest. It was really exciting. We've got the lovely Steve Palise here. Welcome, mate. Thank you for being here today.
No, thank you for having me on. This should be good. We should stitch both our podcasts together, because one's your story and this one's probably going to be my story.
Mate, it's so exciting to have you here because, look, a lot of listeners potentially don't know who you are, especially our audience. And yeah, really excited to uncover your story. And look, for those who don't know Steve, he's a very, very well-versed buyer's agent out there working in the resi and predominantly the commercial space. But he's a great influence of mine. I've used Steve before and I can't speak highly enough about him. So yeah, really excited to unpack your journey, mate, today. And thanks for coming on.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to it.
And you obviously run your own podcast, the commercial investing series. And mate, I love listening to your podcast, especially when you and Andrew get together and talk about the kids. That's my favorite part.
The funny thing is, you probably realize this as a buyer's agent as well, you always think that the knowledge is going to be the thing that people love. They actually just love the real stuff, like what your family life's like. I talk about my divorce and stuff like that. That's the weird thing people are interested in. And back engineering brain, we've both been through this. You think like, I'll give the information, that's what they want. No, they want the outcome. So they want to see the information up front, then the outcome. So it's a weird thing around a business.
They want the goss. They want the goss out there. It's so interesting. You can talk about properties all you want, but they want the goss. I know how it is. So anyway, let's unpack your story, mate, because, you obviously heard a little bit about mine, but for those who don't know, again, we've come from a similar type of trajectory, but I'm really keen to understand your background. So do you want to tell the listeners a bit about your background? Where'd you grow up, mate? What did you do? Tell us a bit about yourself.
So I grew up in Western Sydney in the Parramatta region, a suburb called Wentworthville. Very typical upbringing. My dad was a TV repairman who worked from the garage fixing TVs. So not a great income, but we're a family of 5 living in a 2-bedroom house. So humble beginnings. There's no silver spoon story here. And then I did the usual retail jobs. I packed shelves and all that type of stuff. Pretty academic though. My mum didn't push me to do it. I was just really good at maths to the point I got 99.5 in high school. I had some good options. Could have done medicine, law, actuary, engineering. I chose engineering because I thought it was the coolest one to do. So I chose robotics to study, just because I'm like, if I'm going to do the job, let's make it cool. Back then, I also thought if you worked hard and you were smart, you made good money. So I thought that was a fair exchange of how life was, how very wrong I was. So then finished university, got a medical engineering job, designing robotic limbs and then defibrillators and stuff like that. That didn't pay that well. It was 75 grand a year at the time. So then jumped across and went into mine site design. So I used to design big crushers, grinders, all that type of stuff. And that's when I first got exposed to property. So there was a few young gurus at the time going around with 20 plus portfolios. And I was like, oh, I'm smarter than those guys. Arrogantly, I thought I was smarter than them. So I kind of copied them, emulated, and then bought my first one in Western Sydney as well, in Blacktown. That went from 230 grand to over 300 grand in the first year. And then I was hooked. I was addict. I was just like, how have I made 5 years worth of savings from basically signing a piece of paper, buying one property, and then read every book, listened to every podcast. And then I was still doing the engineering thing. I want to make this clear. I didn't hate work. I didn't hate it. I hated corporate. I hated the hierarchy and kissing the bum to work your way up. But then I also saw the glass ceiling. For an engineer at the time, 150 was the top. And kind of looking down the barrel being like, whoa, am I going to work the next 20 years just earning this? Before I left engineering, I had probably 6 or 7 residential properties. So I was doing really well and interest rates were low. So I had around a $50,000 passive income, thinking I was like, this is awesome. How good am I, kind of thing. But then everyone at work knew me as the property guy. Like the CEO used to come and sit down and have property chats with me once a week about things. And then I was kind of going through a bit of a tough time with like divorce and stuff with my current partner. And I just was like, up, stuff it, let's throw it in. Went and joined a startup buyers agency and then helped grew that to about 20 staff. Again, I left because it got very hierarchical, corporate, and that's not me. I wear t-shirts and, like you, travel around 4 or 6 months of the year. And then closed up shop there, moved overseas. Most people don't know this. I actually started Palise Property, my business, whilst in Europe. So I did it from 20 different countries for the first 2.5 years. And now we're 2,000 plus acquisitions under our belt, 22 plus staff. So it's going really well. So that was the kind of progression.
That's amazing.
We can go into obviously the shift to commercial. So I got up to 9 residential properties. And then, as like all people, servicing became an issue. I had, on top of servicing, I also had a divorce. I had to buy out properties. So that absolutely shot my servicing. I also, leaving engineering, going to a startup company, I didn't have borrowing capacity for a year or two. Then I started my own company and didn't have servicing for a year or two. So all of a sudden I had all these things stopping me from investing. And then I bought a commercial property, and we can talk about this maybe a bit later. Commercial, you can keep buying when servicing is an issue. And I bought that first property for, as a cafe in Ipswich next to a train station, freestanding, 10 car spots, 440 grand. And it gave me around 35 grand a year cash flow. And just recently, in the last couple of years, I've done something very bold. I've pretty much sold all my residential properties and I've just put them into big commercial assets. So my most recent one was a shopping center in Brisbane, 8 tenants, big freestanding site, 3.175 mil. I put 1.5 mil of the profits from my residential portfolio into that. That in 5 years, like 7 years time with interest rates where they're at the moment, is going to be completely debt free. It'll pay itself off and give me around a 280 grand passive income. So I'm planning to buy another one similar to that. So in ideal situation, in 6-7 years time, I'm going to be on half a mil passive income just from those 2 assets. I've got other assets as well, but that's a big bold one. And we can talk about the pros and cons of that, because the negative to that is I'm leaving leverage on the table, but I've got a much shorter time frame where I have a passive income. And we know this because I've spoken to you many times. We've got a very similar ethos of like family time, travel, work is a means to an ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think you can hear the passion in your voice when you're talking about commercial. And, I think a lot of people will see these sort of decisions as bold, starting your business while overseas, converting all your residential into commercial. That it's just not the norm, right? Like that's why people will see that as bold. But in our view, that's probably just the right thing to do in our lives, because that's where our life is and what we see in our sort of future, and especially with kids and everything like that. So completely understand. I want to rewind a little bit, go back to your upbringing. You said that property came from some people that you met. So there was nothing in your family at all over the dinner table that you talked about property at all?
We had the usual like armchair investor chats kind of thing, being like, oh, look at this house in Westmeath, the 200K. Like there was general chats, but no one in my family really had the balls to actually do anything. We were speaking about it for a year. It was actually, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. There was a guy called Nathan Birch who's got a company called B Investor. He was one of the original young gun BAs buying really cheap, affordable properties. I actually went to school with him, so he's my brother's mate. So that's how I knew him fairly well. I used to drive him home after a night out and stuff like that. And he was amassing this big portfolio. And I was like, I thought I was supposed to be the smart one here. Like, how is this guy? And I'm saying this in a kind way. Like, he's done very well and I respect what he's done. But it kind of made me realize, okay, there's more to just working 10-hour days, 5 days a week at an engineering job. So he opened my eyes to kind of do it. And probably gave me some confidence as well, being like, oh, I can actually have a crack at this. I can start my own buyer's agency. Like, we can do that way. So, yeah, he was one of the original ones that gave me that little kick up the bum.
Yeah, for sure. I recall you saying you had a salary of 73K, whatever it was. Mate, in New Zealand, I started off at 37. So you can see the big differences there between why Kiwis come over here, because, the salaries were pretty bad then. As soon as I came here, I was on 50K, and I was an engineer for those who know as well. It's obviously similar industry. 50K over there. I came over here, I was on 92. So, that's sort of the reason why so many of us come over here. But yeah, obviously you're able to leverage into that, into the whole residential portfolio. So you're building your residential portfolio, and then during that residential portfolio, you said, how many did you have? Did you say?
I got up to 9 as a
9. I mean, that's pretty significant. Back then, a different lending environment, though, wasn't it?
It was pretty much if you had the equity there, the banks would give it to you. Full disclosure, because I actually hate when buyers agents like pump up their tires and say, "Oh, I've got like 50 properties." Blah, blah, blah. That's come from business income. I was also with a partner, long-term partner at the time. So we actually had 2 incomes. So like my engineering salary when I left was up to like 140, and she was on something similar as well. So just full disclosure, that's on a circa 300K-ish income.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to just fool anyone being like, "Oh, you're on 75K, you can get 9 properties." No offense, you can't. You need to do something outside the box if you are doing it. Not saying you necessarily can't get there, but you can't do it with servicing. You'll have to do developments or value adds or something special to be able to get there.
Yeah, especially these days. You need, obviously, with the rates and the way the finance environment works, it's very difficult to get to those sort of numbers. But I think, yeah, like I said in the podcast we spoke about, it's not really about the quantity, is it? And you've sort of noted that now when you had the 9 resis, even though you bought fairly affordable properties, there was so much cash flow you can generate out of that. And do you want to talk us a little bit about that sort of realization?
Well, it's also the realization that got me to commercial. My strategy was high cash flow residential. So I'd buy all the stuff, was positively geared from the start, rental increase kicked up. So I had about a 50 grand passive income. Like it was solid. Like for an engineer at the time, like I left on like 140, but I might have been at 100 at the time. I'm like, this is powerful. I can go be the bearded barista and earn 50 grand a year and have the same income with no stress.
Yeah.
But what actually happened was 2 things. First, interest rates started climbing, and I actually saw that number started to creep downward. And then the second one is I discovered commercial. So that was the kind of switch in strategy. I was lucky that I was like everyone else, thought commercial was really high risk, didn't have capital growth. I remember the first one I bought, I looked at it and like, I remember when interest rates were low, like you buy $1 million property and you're talking like 30 grand a year plus passive income from the get-go, from one property. And there I was with 9 properties getting like 50 grand dropping in value. And I even thought, I'm like, there's a catch here. And then after I bought like 100 of them for clients, I was like, okay, there's not. This is a big secret, which also spurred me to write the book. I wrote the first commercial book in the market because I'm like, people need to know about this. This is a really cool asset class.
Mate, absolutely. Like, I mean, I think so many are in the same boat. I was in the same boat where, the interest rate started hiking up. I went from positive 60 to negative 60. So that was 120K turnaround. And, and that's actually when I had just bought the commercial. So thank goodness they were there. They were actually propping up my resi portfolio. For those out there thinking about commercial, when do you think is a great time to get into commercial?
Well, really, really good question. I actually like to answer this with when commercial is wrong for you. So let me bring it back to fundamentals first. So on paper, residential and commercial grow exactly the same. That's a misconception. They don't grow. If they grew differently, like let's say residential grew an extra 2% per annum over 30 years, residential should be twice the value, but it's not. Like they're always on par. They just happen out of cycles. Different commercials grow at different rates. Like office space is not going to grow the same as a house, but a warehouse will. So like this, you've got to compare like for like. So you get the same capital growth. You also get 3 times the cash flow. So then you start going, well, if I'm getting the same capital growth at 3 times the cash flow, why aren't I just buying commercial? Good question. The answer comes down to leverage. So residential, they will lend to you much higher loan to value ratios. You can get 90%. Like, for example, my first property, I bought a 90% loan to value ratio. Next one, I bought at 100%. The one after that, I bought 105% because I had the servicing. So effectively, I got 3 properties with 110% deposit. Commercial, there's a couple lenders doing 80%, but most are getting 70% loan to value ratios. So you miss out on the main power of property leverage. So I'd rather go out and buy 3 90% loans, residential, than 1 commercial on 70% because I'm going to have 3 times the asset base. So if it doubles or the rents double, I'm making 3 times as much. So that's the reason why everyone doesn't go out and buy commercial. And that's sort of why I pivoted as well, because I was like, well, I'm out of servicing. I've got the equity. I need to just shift into commercial. When to not shift to commercial is when you've still got really good servicing and high loan to value ratios ability with the banks. Assuming that's your strategy. Like if you're young and keen and want to grow a big portfolio, use servicing to your advantage. Build as big a base as you can. As long as you can hold, like you said, the negative gearing side of it.
Yeah.
That's when commercial's not right for you. The other ones, if you've got limited capital, so if you've only got like 50 or 100 grand, because of the 70% loan to value as commercial, you're not going to get much. So you're better off putting that 50, 100 grand into like a 300 or 500 grand residential on a higher loan to value ratio. And then the third one is you just don't understand commercial. We'll probably go into this on the podcast. There's way more moving parts and so many more things you can actually trip up on. So they're the three that you wouldn't buy. When it's right for you, if you're at your servicing limit, or you're like us, you're trying to build a passive income quickly, they're the two good reasons to get into it. But again, it's balancing what you're trying to achieve, what time frame you want to do it in versus what you've got to work with finance.
Yeah. I sometimes have people come up to me with very strong incomes and very good savings, right? So do you want to just talk to this question then? They can service residential quite well, but they can really service commercial quite well. If you're saying commercial can grow just as much as residential and get that passive income right from the start, why would you not go from it? If you've got those kind of massive incomes and a great savings amount, why would you not go for it straight away? From my perspective, I think the last point you talked about is that risk and those moving parts. What's your thoughts on that?
Just because they've got the same servicing for both doesn't mean they necessarily are going to buy to the same servicing. So they still might go buy residential on 80 or 90% loan to value ratio. So they're still getting a bigger net base. However, if their total portfolio is under that 70% loan to value ratio, which mine actually is, I'm actually under 50% because I'm really risk adverse, which is quite funny that I'm a buyer's agent. I'm really risk adverse, but it's just me. So there's no advantage there because no matter what, I'm going to get the same lending for residential versus commercial. And this is probably a little nugget for your listeners. Go to your broker and go ask them, what's my maximum residential capacity? What's my maximum commercial capacity? And what are the limiting factors for each one? Is it capital or servicing? And that'll actually give you a bit of gauge of what to do with the plan. So we've had clients that high income earners, but they've bought lots of negatively geared properties and they're out of servicing, but they've got the equity. So they could pull out the equity. They just don't have the servicing to do anything with it. We then get a lease stock loan or a commercial loan. And I had a guy 6 months ago, he's got $2 million capacity for commercial and zero for residential. So that's a pretty easy answer. Where it gets harder is when the resi comes back bigger. If it comes back 2 mil for resi and 1.2 for commercial, that's a harder strategy to come up with.
Now, coming back to your portfolio, you had those resis. Now, you said you've sold off the bulk of them and you've bought a couple of big commercial properties. Do you want to just repeat again? So you've got your big shopping centre that you've got, and do you have any others at the moment?
I've got other properties, the smaller ones, but with the proceeds of my residential sellout, I'm going to buy another big one. I'm actually on the lookout at the moment.
Yep.
Got one in the Central Coast I'm actually looking at the moment. It's a dual income warehouse. I'm going to diversify the asset types. I'm not going to buy like another retail center because I'm kind of already got there. Even though if you buy in a different location, you're still diversifying because it's like a Queensland shopping center is going to act differently to a Sydney one, for instance. So it's still diversifying, but I like industrials, really low risk and versatile. So I'm going to either buy a really good blue chip tenant one, like a pet barn on a big long lease, or a multi-tenancy one where smaller tenants but reduce the risk. So that's probably going to be in the 3 to 4.5 mil price point.
Yeah.
And just those two properties alone are going to give me $500,000 passive income in the following 6 or 7 years. And this is a question as well, is you only use the passive income if you actually need it. So on my social medias, I kind of say to people, oh, look, I'm going to buy these 2 assets. Then I'm done. I'm retiring in 5-6 years coming. In reality, that's not how I'm going to play it out. It's just good for like the illustration of what it can do.
Yeah.
What I'll probably do is, knowing that like they're low risk properties with lots of tenants, if I either get rental increases, so let's say the rents go up by 25%, the way commercials get valued is based on the rent. So that's actually 25% growth. Or I get cap rate compression, which is just they're growing naturally without the rental increases. And my 50% loan to value ratio drops to 25%. I will probably go out, because I'm not using 500 grand a year anyway, pull out the 25% from each of them and then buy another 3 or 4 mil assets. So it's going to be like a self-perpetuating thing for my children, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't spend 500 grand a year. I lived in Europe for 2.5 years and spent around 120 grand. I'm not into fancy cars. I've started flying business, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I'll keep that going. But in reality, I'm probably only going to spend a couple $100 grand a year. So the extra funds can fund the future ones. But it's just illustrative wise, like to show that you could buy 2 assets and get that type of income. And I'm not saying it's easy, like buying 7 mil worth of assets with a 50% deposit is tough. and it's resi that got me there. But when you look at the size of a resi portfolio that you need for a $500,000 passive income, like I'm not even joking, we're talking 50 mil portfolios.
Yeah, yeah. And look, and that's why it's amazing, because I feel like you're the type of person who can go out there, like with just based on what you've been able to do, not yourself, but what you've been able to do, you're able to get that massive income and buy, these huge 50, $100 million portfolios, but it's not what you want at the end of the day, isn't it? And I think that's why I really gravitate with yourself. You're not looking to spend, $500,000, $1 million every year on stupid shit. Basically, you're humble and you want to spend things like me on experiences, spend time with the family. I think that speaks volumes rather than a lot of other buyers agents who are, that are big. And I know the way they spend and quite frivolous and just what you see, it's really engaging, I suppose. And that's why I can, gravitate towards that.
I want to point out though, like, and you're probably a testament to this as well, is having a large residential portfolio has huge risk with it. You saw it with your negative gearing when your portfolio switched and started costing you money. Leveraging up to the eyeballs has risks. If interest rates rise, if like maintenance, like there's all these risks with that. So even though I could theoretically lend more, I actually sleep better at night knowing I don't have to worry.
Yep.
Like the banks, I'll be full disclosure, the banks are willing to give me 12 mil plus, like extra. Like I could go out and buy a 12 mil commercial. That's me going financially ruined, declaring bankruptcy if that went vacant for a long period. Whereas my current ones can actually be vacant literally like more than 70% of the time, or interest rates have to go to 13% before I dip into my own pocket. Like that's very comforting at night.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I look, there's a couple that we know that have those huge portfolios, but I'm the same. I certainly don't want to have, 10 properties plus, in retirement or whenever we finish our portfolio. We're looking to sell down. We want to get more commercials at the end of the day and buy bigger ones. And that way you're set on that passive income, but without the headaches of, 10 other properties. And so, yeah, completely agree with that. As a segue with that shopping center that you're buying, you mentioned a few pros and cons. Do you want to just highlight some of the pros and cons, listeners got to think about when you're buying assets like that?
Yeah, okay. I'll give you full disclosure. So I bought one in the Logan area in Queensland, if people know what it is, southeast Brisbane. Entire shopping centre. So it's got 8 tenants. It's on a big size lot, 3,500 square meters. I liked it because it's across from a major state school and across from a kindergarten, and there was always a good flow of steady traffic and no other competition within about a kilometre and a half radius, because that was their check town planning. No other little shopping centres going in. I was like, cool, this is low risk because there's always going to be a need for hairdressers, barbers, cafes, fish and chip shops, massage, beauty salons, etc., which has got some of those in it. So I like that. Then I also looked at the last 10 years of vacancy, and in the last 10 years, there's only been 2 vacancies, and the longest period was 6 months. The other one was like 3 months. Funnily enough, I actually kicked a tenant out, which we can talk about why I did that as well. And I got 3 applications in the first 3 months for tenants. So like it's a good asset.
Yeah.
However, there's risks to those ones as well. There's more kind of like mental space you need for it because the property manager is constantly dealing with 8 different tenants. And then there's always people dumping rubbish or untoward characters hanging around, and the other security systems getting damaged. And there's always bits and pieces with it, but nothing's risk-free at the moment. The 2 big ones I keep my eye on is the roof. There's occasionally leaks in the roof, so I got to deal with that at some point. That might be an $80,000 fix at some point. And a retaining wall out the back, which is starting on its last legs. So in the next 10 years, there might be another 100 grand there. However, it's going to be giving me 250 grand plus a year. So you amortize that over time. It's cool. It's probably more likely a 230 grand passive income over 10, 20 years.
I've got 2 questions for you. How much time do you spend on your portfolio?
Nothing. I'm going to say collectively 10 minutes a month.
Even with that many businesses in your commercial properties?
I pay $20,000 for a property manager for that center. So the 10 minutes is reading her updates. So her updates will be like, hey, this happened. I did this to fix it. And that's it. And you get one of those every 2 or 3 weeks. Then the whole 10 minutes comes from my other portfolio. So I've still got quite a few other properties, commercial and a couple resi. My partner's got a couple resis as well. But again, this is why you get a good property manager. They shouldn't be asking you anything. They should just be asking yes and no as a most. When I had a resi portfolio, I used to get asked this question all the time. They're like, oh, how do you manage 9 properties? You don't. You pay the property manager. I gave my property managers $500 don't contact me rule. Literally, I was like, if it's less than 500, just put it on the invoice at the end of the month. I'll see it then. And then you stop getting harassed about all the small things.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was just thinking, because with that kind of size of commercial property or the number of businesses, are there many property managers that have the capabilities to do what you're saying?
It's a specialized, like the property manager one for a retail center. You want to get someone experienced in managing retail centers. There's way more moving parts. It's probably the negative of retail over industrial. Industrial is 3 concrete tilt-up panels and a roller door.
Yep.
Very simple to manage. Tenant looks after everything. Even with your one, you probably get a new email every few months and that's kind of it. Most of the time, body corporate looks after it or the property manager looks after it. This, because you've got things like rubbish collection, gardening, landscaping, maintaining the car park, maintaining the roof, security systems. We had just a unsavory character hanging around at night time under the light time, shooting up drugs. So it's like, what do we do with that? Like, do we ignore it? Do we report to the police? Then they try to break into the toilets one times as well. So we put an extra security. So it's just all these little niggles.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's why I gave you 10 minutes as the answer, because every probably 3-4 weeks I'll email me like, oh, this happened. This is what we're doing. We're putting a new lock on this door or blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of crutch. So more annoyances with like a retail thing. However, I've also got 3,500 square meters. So if they ever change like the zoning in the area from low density to medium density, I'm sitting on a huge development play. Or I could also build residential on top of the retail center. I could add another tenancy. I can rent car spots out. Like, I've got options with it, which is the benefit of that type of asset.
Well, yeah, I was exactly where I was going. I was going to ask you why you didn't buy a $3,500 square meter shed industrial as opposed to a retail asset. So from what I gather, it's about the diversity. It's about the number of tenants you can get. Was that the main benefit rather than industrial?
I was looking for both. So it's not like it's just that one came first. However, like I said before, I'm drawing a line in the sand. The next one's going to be industrial to kind of get. And again, I'm in a budget where I will look for freestanding. If it's not freestanding, I'll make sure it's got a really cool X factor about it. Like like a huge international tenant or something, which will mitigate the risk. Because this is the crux of it. Like, all this investing is to park my money and profits from a residential investing, and even a little bit of my business, because business is doing well as well, into an asset that preserves my lifestyle of traveling 4 months of the year with my family. That's all it is.
That's it.
And even my accountant, who's a very, like, my accountant, he's a very successful investor. He even said, he's like, Steve, you've got 20 plus staff of people finding all these cool value add deals. Why aren't you buying a value add? And I'm like, it's just more work. Why would I want to add another layer of work when I'm actually trying to get away from work? I'm not trying to add things on. And so all my properties moving forward now are set and forget. If something comes up that's easy, like I find a massive freestanding warehouse and it doesn't have a mezzanine floor, cool. I might buy that in the future knowing going, okay, if this good tenant leaves in 5-10 years time, I might have the option, I'll build that. But that's not time intensive. Trying to get like this cool like development play where you buy a thing, build another shed, do this, like I've done developments before. They're a nightmare.
Yeah, and that's a great point to the listeners. It's not all about complexity that equals money. At the end of the day, the simple things can make the biggest differences, So I think that's a great point. I'm asking all these questions, Steve, because, a lot of my listeners are focused on residential, and I think they'll be really intrigued with the whole commercial side. I'm sure you get that all the time. The biggest thing is that when you've got a residential portfolio, as time goes on, yes, the values might increase, but so does the insurances, so does the outgoings, the rates, they all increase proportionally. Whereas commercial, we've got our tenants. and that's one of the biggest things, isn't it? To get that income, a lot of people don't take into account the outgoings as time goes on with residential versus commercial.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just explain why when I'm saying we're getting 6% or 5% or 7%, commercial leases and yields are net yields. So that's the key difference. A residential is a gross, and the reason a commercial, if we buy a 6% net yield, the tenant pays council rates, water rates, maintenance, insurance, pretty much everything, even property management and land tax in some situations. So it's actually net. So you buy $1 million asset, you get on a 6% net return, 60 grand into your bank account every year. No other outgoing besides your mortgage repayments. That's it. You go buy $1 million residential and you can't get 6% anymore. Most people are lucky if they buy, let's say 4%. That's 4% gross yield, because you're, as a landlord, responsible for council rates, water rates, maintenance, insurance, which actually whittles down that 4% closer to a 2% net. So it takes 2% of your net away. That's why it's 3 times the income for commercial. You got 2% net versus 6% net. So you're getting 3
Yeah.
times the cash flow per year, which is that people still don't believe me. Like, I'm like, what more do I need? I've got a podcast, I've got a book, I've got a commercial course. Like, what do I have to do to convince you? They just don't get it. The people who do get it are business owners that are actually paying rent because they realize they're paying all the bills.
It is hard sometimes to understand because everyone's minds are wrapped around their own rent or if they own a home, how much they've got to pay out of pocket. It's almost like it's too good to be true. So I can understand where people are coming from. But yes, that is the case. I've got a commercial property. All I get is my rent, and our tenant pays all those other insurances and rates. So that's a pretty cool thing. My last question for you, which I think is quite important, is, and this is actually a more self-proclaiming than anything else, is what's the minimum price point would you say for a good commercial property these days? And I know it's a very broad question, but do you have a view on that?
The way I explain it is like generally 400, 500K, you can start getting into a nice little like body corporate warehouse or a little retail shop, probably on the outskirts of a capital city or in a regional town. They've both got a pro and a con though. So like the industrial, for instance, a little cheap one, you're not going to get a long lease. It's going to be average Steve's electrical services or something like that. So a sole trader, they're only going to be signing like 12-month and 2-year leases. And they're going to be quite volatile as a tenant because they'll either grow and they'll outgrow the space, or they'll fail, close up shop, and you'll get a new tenant. On those, you typically get a new tenant every like 3 to 5 years. So you're cycling through tenants a lot, a bit more headache. There's a loan called lease stock loans, which is based on length of lease. That's off the table because you're not getting a good one. So you've got these little asset. It's good because it's good yield in that. However, you're going to cycle through new tenants. It's be a bit more of a headache. However, the vacancy rate's really tight as well. So like vacancy on industrial is like 1-2 months in the areas I buy. Similar for the retail. However, you get those tenants for longer. They're probably there for like 5 to 10 years. But the vacancy on a retail shop is more like 6 to 18 months. So it's a bit more risky in that low price point anyway. So they're the kind of risks of when you're going on the lower end.
Yeah.
As you start moving up in price point, you start getting longer leases, more blue chip tenants, more blue chip locations, start to move to freestanding, you start to move to multi-tenancy, start to moving to the big players like the big McDonald's and Pet Barnes and Bunnings and that. So I explain it is you can get a good one at the 300, 400, but be aware there's the risk with it.
Yeah.
And as you move up in budget, you get to see more variety. They're all good. You can also argue that going out instead of buying a $2 million quality asset in quotation marks, a better strategy is going out and buying 4 slightly higher risk 500K ones because you diversify location, the tenant, the type. You could get 1 medical, 1 retail, 2 industrial. That's arguably more maintenance and management involved, but arguably a good defensive trade. That's what my brother does. And I'm the opposite. I'm buying the big ones. But yeah, fancy question, 400, 500, ideally 750K plus, you'll start like ticking all the usual boxes of good tenant, good location, tight vacancy rate, versatile premises is the fundamentals, what you look for.
Yeah, cool. Well, I suppose, mate, that you've answered obviously a lot of my commercial questions, but if you had to go back and do what you've done, would you do anything differently?
Really good question, actually. Not get divorced again. That was horrible for the portfolio. I'm happy now. So that's fine. I was a bit joking with that. I probably would have started buying commercial sooner when I was out of servicing. So remember I mentioned before about changing the jobs and getting the divorced. When my servicing took a hit, I was still scrambling to buy more residential and I was doing anything. And I started buy a few duds that I shouldn't have bought. They still did all right, but they weren't the right thing at that time. Like I bought an apartment in Cairns cash, $30,000, and it gave me 160.
Right.
You're like, oh, I need to get anything. I was silly though. I could have leveraged that potentially to got into like a 200, 300 grand asset. But yeah, I should have probably threw in commercial earlier. But from an educational point of view, I didn't understand commercial enough to do that anyway. So it's good in hindsight, but not so great in the practicality of reliving it again.
Yeah, look, I mean, we can all go back and change things. I certainly would. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, whoever's taken action, you've done all right. At the end of the day, Pate, you've done amazingly well. I mean, like I said, you're someone that I really like to look up to just in terms of your lifestyle and your modest, sort of view on life in terms of what you can achieve and what you actually do. So that's amazing. I think you've given a really good overview to our listeners of what your portfolio is looking like now. And I'm really keen to understand or hear when you get your second big commercial property and, sell off all your residential. So that'll be really cool. So really awesome to have you on today. And really happy that you could come on and share your journey with us.
No, thank you so much for the kind words, man. And for being a client as well with the commercial. Like, really appreciate your trust and your kind words. So, no, it's awesome. Anytime you want to come back on, more than happy to.
Thanks so much, man. Like, I think for the listeners, a lot of them wouldn't understand commercial so much, but they do now. And, they've got a really good idea. If you do want to know more, please contact Steve and his team at Palise Property. He's got, 3 books now?
3 books, got a resi, commercial, and a development one. But for those who are actually interested in commercial, the commercial book's good, 300 pages of everything you need to know. I've also got an educational commercial podcast where the first 10 episodes are everything you need to know. Yep. I've also got a 10-hour course for commercial. All of these are free. So you don't have to use my services. You just get educated. Hopefully it proves confidence, and then that's why you come and use my services. But get educated first, and you'll actually see there are some good options with commercial.
Yeah, and you need to get educated way more than residential, in my opinion. Residential is forgiving, commercial, in my opinion, is not if you don't get it right. So very, very important to get educated. But Steve's the man if you want to reach out and understand more about commercial. But mate, thanks again for coming on, and really appreciate it. And I can't wait to have you back on again.
No, legend. Thank you, man.
No worries. All right, guys, we'll see you next time on the IJ podcast. Cheers, and we'll see you later. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the chat, feel free to drop us a rating on Spotify or wherever you listen. It helps us reach more listeners to help them with their journey. Catch you in the next episode.